The Young and the Restless spoilers Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. The leaks circling Genoa City paint a week of hard lines, soft confessions, and promises that might cost more than anyone expects. And at the center of it all stands Billy Abbott doing something that will surprise his family, rattle his enemies, and force the town to take him seriously again. He chooses commitment publicly, emphatically, and without his trademark hedging to Sally Spectra. It does not arrive as a diamond before dinner spectacle or a crowd-pleasing speech. It arrives as a deliberate pivot in how Billy moves through power and partnership. He doesn't just tell Sally she can count on him, starts proving it in the only currency that means anything to the Abbotts and their rivals: infrastructure and access. If the whispers are true, he will back her with the same stubborn tenacity that Jack once used to defend Jabbett, and the same reckless courage that has both doomed and redeemed him a dozen times. Whether he drops to one knee or not, Billy's vow reads like a professional marriage. He will help her stand up Abbott Communications, an audacious venture that dares to synthesize marketing, story-making, and media leverage under one roof, with Sally as the creative nerve and Billy as the firewall. The risks are obvious. Screeding, a communications arm that bears the Abbott name, inevitably drags the family into the line of fire, and it invites comparisons to Newman-style empire building, but the upside seduces Billy because for the first time in a long time, he sees a way to give someone he loves the tools to win on her terms instead of blowing up her momentum with his volatility. Sally reads him warily at first, rightly skeptical of grand gestures from a man famous for starting wildfires to keep warm, yet she cannot ignore the substance on the table: budgets, talent pipelines, editorial calendars, launch strategies, and a promise to use Abbott credibility to open doors that have been deadbolted to Spectra ambition. If he follows through, he becomes the rare partner who matches her grind without suffocating it. A man who finally understands that love in Genoa City doesn't survive without a plan. Elsewhere, a different kind of promise sharpens into reality as Amanda Sinclair Precise, relentless, allergic to theatric, steps into Phyllis Summers' corner and makes it clear that she is not here to dab at wounds. She is here to fight. Their reunion doesn't glow with nostalgia. It crackles with the focus of two women who know how the board is set and what it takes to redraw the lines. Amanda has the receipts, the case law, the long memory, and the inconvenient questions. And she's willing to burn through billable hours like jet fuel if it means Phyllis won't take another fall to satisfy someone else's storyline. It is Amanda, too, who names the shadow many prefer to ignore. Kane Ashby is not retired from ambition. While others romanticize his absences or underestimate his appetite, Amanda reads the pattern: quiet consolidation, a talent for slipping through cracks, the patience to wait for people to blink, and warns Phyllis that Kane rarely drops a plan simply because it's impolite. If there is a play for influence, distribution, or soft power leverage in this town, he could be near it, and anyone who forgets that invites trouble. The warning lands, not as paranoia, but as pragmatic muscle memory. Phyllis has survived too many cycles of being underestimated to pretend that threats vanish just because you refuse to look at them. And for once, Phyllis doesn't have to spin alone. She has a lawyer who will walk into the smoke with her, and a strategy designed to keep her from being the story while still controlling intricisely, the kind of paradox that makes Phyllis dangerous when she's focused and protected. At the Abbott estate, gravity reasserts itself. Jack Abbott and Diane Jenkins return buoyed by travel and routine victories, only to collide with the quiet aftermath of a proposal that should never have been staged. Their expressions to practice to be shocked, to parental to be smug, see everything before the words arrive. Kyle wanted the fairy tale shortcut. Claire wanted the slow work of rebuilding. He chose spectacle. She chose self-respect. The "we told you so" isn't delivered as a gavel. It is administered as medicine, bitter, necessary, and perhaps life-saving if he swallows it. Jack speaks from hard experience, knowing the cost of ego under pressure. Diane speaks from the scar tissue of reinvention, knowing how easily performance masquerades as care. Together they draw the line Kyle refused to see. Love only grows in the daylight of patience, not in the glare of an apology wrapped in carrots. What stings most is not the rejection, but the clarity it brings. Kyle thought he could outrun doubt with velocity. He learns, painfully, that trust has a speed limit. The lesson might have landed quietly if not for the echo booming across town. Claire, done being triangulated by lies and leverage, has stopped waiting for Kyle to become someone else. She has chosen partnership with the one person who's been a constant in the Ka-Oshulden Novacan. The mission is not abstract. It has a name, Audra Charles. Relentless describes Nikki Newman when she wants romance as precisely as when she wants control. And this week she wants both. The plan for a romantic evening with Victor is not a Hallmark detour. It is Nikki's declaration that intimacy is also strategy. In a household where affection and power often trade uniforms, Nikki understands that reminding Victor of their shared center is the only way to negotiate with the part of him that prefers conquest to conversation. The wine is curated, the playlist is studied, the lighting is deliberate. And yet this is not a performance for Victor's benefit alone. It is for Nikki, too. A way to stage a night where the man she married wins out over the mogul she survives. A way to tell herself that tenderness still has a seat at a table otherwise reserved for tactics. Across the chessboard, Michael Baldwin is staring down a very different kind of evening, the first real taste of life after Victor. A job opportunity that smells like oxygen after months of recycled air. He has been restless, whittled thin by idle hours and the ache to matter, and now an offer knocks that would let him build again instead of babysit crises. The catch's familiar path to relevance in Genoa City always runs beside a fault line. If Abbott Communications needs counsel as it comes online, if a rival consortium wants a grown-up in the room, if a civic slate needs a tactician who can speak fluent courtroom, and corporate any of those roads lead to Michael violating the unwritten oath that everything orbit around Newman gravity. He can feel Victor's stare from miles away. He can also feel the old thrill of solving problems that require both scalpel and shield, and for a man who has worn both, there is nothing more seductive. Victoria Newman, meanwhile, is doing what she does best, absorbing the blast so someone else doesn't detonate. Nate Hastings arrives at her door confessing, not courting, and she lets him empty the drawer of every raw feeling he's been hiding since Audra's duplicity came into focus. Their history thrums under the conversation like an electric wire resolved, dangerous, illuminating a Victoria doesn't pick it up. She simply doesn't step on it. She listens like a CEO, triaging the facts, and like a mother, protecting the perimeter around Claire, who has earned the right to rebuild without being injured by the fallout of someone else's plot. Nate needed a witness who understood what it meant to be used in the crossfire of a power play and to keep breathing anyway. Victoria needed a reminder that empathy is not weakness when you aim it with precision. Whether that opens a door neither of them should walk through is a question for another night. For now, she gives him what Audra never did, the truth without an invoice, which brings the narrative to the week's sharpest edge. Claire and Holden choosing to collaborate, not as a flirtation disguised as strategy, but as strategy that refuses to apologize for any intimacy it generates. Audra has haunted both of them in different register seduction for Kyle at Claire's expense. Leverage against Holden's life at the exact moments he needed steadiness in, they are done bleeding privately to make everyone else comfortable. Their alliance is as simple as a clear target and as complex as to people who, piece by piece, have found in each other the presence that others promised and failed to deliver. They gather facts, sightings, leverage points, the loose ends of favors owed and debts outstanding, and they map the pressure points that Audra counts on other people being too polite or too frightened to touch. Holden does not posture, he calibrates. Claire does not posture, she executes. And when the board is set, they do not wait for an invitation. The confrontation arrives before the weak and quiet has a chance to settle. and it is not theatrical so much as surgical. Claire advances, and for once Audra does not meet a tremor, she meets a wall. Claire has proof that part of what Audra fed her about Kyle was true enough to shatter illusions, not true enough to justify the weaponization. Claire insists on the distinction. You told me just enough truth to smuggle in your lie. You told me what would keep me off balance while you arranged the rest. Audra tries the tools that have saved her 100 times, the pivot to offense, the practiced gasp, the invitation to blame a larger monster so she can slip out as a misunderstood survivor. But Claire has done the arithmetic, and Holden has double-checked it. They present the pattern in sequence rather than in fragments, and patterns are where Audra's bravado falters. What happens next will not be decided by volume or venom. It will be decided by who understands the consequences better. Audra can scorch earth as Beforian she may yet try. Claire can choose which bridges she is willing to burn to end the siege. And Holden can translate that choice into tactics that leave less shrapnel. The outcome is not a coin flip. It is a test of endurance. All of it folds back into the families who pretend they are above it and the partners who know they are not. Billy's vow to stand with Sally will draw commentary from every corridor of Abbott power, quiet approval from those who see the utility, visible worry from those who know how quickly communications can become a weapon, and an almost fatherly pride from Jack if Billy sustains the discipline he so often abandons. Sally, for her part, will have to resist the urge to prove too much too quickly. Abbott Communications is not a mood board. It is a promise to turn creativity into durable influence, and that means standards, guardrails, and the humility to hire people who will tell her no. Amanda's legal perimeter around Phyllis will repel the first wave and invite a clever second, because the moment you lock one door in this town, someone hunts for the service entrance. Nikki's romantic calculus with Victor will buy them both a pocket of gentleness they needed, and they earn it, but it will also remind Nikki how nimble she must be to keep tenderness alive adjacent to Empire. Michael's job decision will write the week's quietest cliffhanger, loyalty as a habit on one side, purpose as oxygen on the other. Victoria's late-night conversation with Nate will hover like a resting storm to people who can save each other or relapse each other depending on which memory they honor. And at the cliff's edge, Claire and Audra will stand in a room that suddenly feels too small for both of them, with Holden steady behind Claire and the sound of Kyle's regret traveling through the walls from the Abbott estate, where his parents have finally said, gently and unavoidably, that love cannot be bullied into being. So who wins the showdown, Audra or Claire? In Genoa City, victory rarely announces itself with confetti. If Claire wins, it will look like boundaries that hold, a refusal to be maneuvered, a partnership with Holden that stays strategic even if it warms into something more. If Audra wins, it will look like survival again, an escape hatch opened in the floor while everyone is still staring at the door, and a repositioning so clean that people convince themselves she has changed when really she has only changed altitude. Either way, the weak refuses to blink. Commitments are made in public and tested in private. Old allies become new witnesses. Parents say we warned you without malice because love gets tired of watching preventable fires. And the city that never truly sleeps, its boardrooms, brownstones, penthouses, clubs, and corridors leans forward to watch the next hand flipped. Billy bets on Sally with a plan instead of a poem. Amanda makes the law feel like armor. Jack and Diane force growth where comfort failed. Nikki manufactures tenderness like only a warrior can. Michael weighs meaning against muscle memory. Victoria listens with both spine and heart. Nate breathes for the first time in days. Claire chooses the forward path. Holden matches it. And Audra decides whether to retreat and reload or stand and scorch. The rest is not fate so much as follow-through. And this time, far more than reputations are on the lineage are building or burying futures in real time. And the young and the restless will not look the same once the weak exhales. Claire Newman does not reject Kyle Abbott because she has stopped loving him. She rejects him because he treats love like a problem to be solved with speed, spectacle, and an expensive answer that glitters louder than accountability. He arrives with a plan that looks good on paper and even better under soft lighting family jeweler on call. Timing engineered for maximum surprise. A future sketched in bright. Confidence strokes that pretend the recent past didn't happen and expects the human heart to fall in line. But the very urgency of his proposal becomes its indictment. Claire hears the quiet message beneath the velvet box. Let's not sit with what I broke. Let's build something so dazzling we can't see the cracks. She has no patience left for shortcuts. The night unfolds with the kind of clarity that leaves no room for pretense. Claire refuses the ring. She refuses the narrative in which her pain is a speed bump on the highway back to happily ever after. And yes, she snaps because the attempt to fast forward her healing feels like a second betrayal, a denial of the slow, difficult work she asked him to honor. Kyle calls it love. She calls it triage designed to protect his conscience, not her future. The irony is that the two people who could have saved him from this humiliation tried, tirelessly, to do so. Jack Abbott knows the price of acting from Pride Under Pressure. Diane Jenkins knows the difference between reinvention and performance. Together they warn their son to decelerate, to rebuild in the daylight rather than stage a midnight miracle. He misread their care as interference, and the bill for that misreading is now due. In the echo of Claire's no, Kyle reaches for a familiar anesthesia. Blame. If Audra Charles hadn't slithered back into his life in nice, if temptation hadn't materialized with a practiced smile and a convenient hotel corridor, if a kiss hadn't been waiting where a boundary should have been, then maybe none of this would have happened. But Claire refuses to launder his responsibility through Audra's reputation. She can hate Audra for her predatory calculus and still hold Kyle accountable for the choice he made all by himself. That is what infuriates her mossed hypocrisy of a man who wants absolution without admission. Across town, Holden Novak does not rush the moment or insert himself into the wreckage to collect a prize. He waits. He waits because he respects the line between solace and opportunity, because he understands that people are not consolation trophies, and because he has learned the hard way that intimacy built on rebound timing collapses under its own weight. His patience is not passive, it's principled. He lets Claire breathe, then shows up where it counts in the quiet spaces where she isn't performing courage for anyone. Grief and disappointment are strangely efficient matchmakers when handled with care. The more Kyle's defensiveness hardens, the more Claire trusts Holden's steadiness. They don't plan a romance, they plan a response, one that refuses to let Audra's interference go unchallenged. If Kyle is content to cast Audra as the sole architect of disaster to avoid looking in the mirror, Claire is not. She and Holden build a ledger, conversations remembered, texts preserved, dates and timelines aligned, the slipstreams where Newman money intersects with Audra's ambitions, the aftersmell of a deal that seems to follow every room she enters. They talk to people who were paid to forget and paid again to remember. They collect names of concierge staff who saw more than they were supposed to in nice, assistants who carried garment bags and secrets, and a junior accountant who noticed that consulting invoices do a lot of heavy lifting when someone wants to hide the shape of a bargain. Holden moves like water, around obstacles rather than through them. Claire moves like a metronome, precise and relentless. Where Kyle flails, they calibrate. Where Audra improvises, they diagram. For Claire, the target is not revenge so much as relief. She wants the interference to stop, the gaslighting to end, the space to decide her life without someone else placing bets on the outcome. For Holden, it is something simpler and harder to protect a woman who has spent too much time guarding herself alone. The heat between them arrives like weather you knew was coming. Still, they refuse to rename strategy as seduction. They keep their promises small and keep them. They trade shortcuts for process. The result is intimacy with scaffolding, not fireworks without a fire escape. And in the kitchen, where Kyle's ring once sparkled under recessed lights, Claire feels something steadier than triumph, a spine that no longer asks permission to hold her upright. Across another fault line, the truth Audra swore would stay contained slips its chain, and the person it injures most is not Claire, not Kyle, not even Victor Newman, who bankrolled the gamble, but Nate Hastings, a man who has already surrendered too much skin to the machinery of other people's strategies. Audra finally says it out loud. There was a deal. Victor would grease the runway for Vibrani, her cosmetics venture, if she could distract Kyle, derail Claire, and weaken an alliance Newman Power never fully trusted. It is transactional romance, corporate sabotage packaged as chemistry, and Nate hears the confession not as a single betrayal, but as a chorus of every time he has been used, doubted, or invited to mistake attention for care. He ends it decisively because there is no version of respect that survives a revelation like that. And when the adrenaline fades, he does what the bruised do when they are tired of pretending they are fine. He goes to the one person who understands love weaponized by proximity to power. Victoria Newman opens the door with questions in her eyes and room in her evening for an honesty that neither of them could manage the last time around. Their conversation is not a revival tour, it is triage. Nate talks too much and exactly enough about the felt sense of being played, about how quickly he can become a character in someone else's scheme when he forgets to write his own script, about the way ambition without ballast turns him into a man he doesn't like. Victoria listens with the double vision that defines her at her best, ruthless in analysis, soft in reception. She does not excuse Audra. She does not sanctify Nate. She draws a border around Claire's well-being, too, because mothering a daughter who keeps attracting storms requires the stubbornness to read her at every gust away from her. And then, against all odds and all good advice, a familiar current moves through the room there, unfinished business, humming like a transformer. They do not touch that wire, not tonight. But neither of them pretends it isn't live. If a reunion comes, it will arrive not because they couldn't help themselves, but because they chose the risk with their eyes open. Choosing risk is what Genoa City does best, and the week proves it again a few blocks away, where Lily Winters reminds Kane Ashby that polite conversation is a poor substitute for discovery. She wants the truth about the plan he insists he has shelved, the Restless campaign to carve out a fresh empire inside a city that already bears too many of his fingerprints. Kane performs contrition with the precision of a man who has studied the role. He says the right words about peace, about perspective, about priorities. Lily doesn't confuse vocabulary for transformation. She watches how he measures silence, where his gaze lands when she says done, and how often he reaches for verbs in the future tense. What she suspects is what he is. He hasn't abandoned the strategy. He has refined the camouflage. Real estate that doubles as influence, supply chains disguised as goodwill, dormant shell companies that are only sleeping because they haven't heard the alarm cane's blueprint hums beneath the floorboards. He is not building a throne. He is building a switchboard. The danger is not that Lily can't stop him. It is that no one will notice until the lights flicker and the room obeys his hand. The episodes braid these threads until each character becomes the other's consequence. Jack and Diane absorb their son's collapse without gloating. Turn "we told you" into a set of practice-esque Claire's boundary. What it is, stop trying to solve Shane with speed. Apologize like a verb instead of a prop. Kyle finally hears the sentence he has dodged for months. There is no world in which you heal someone you injured by asking them to hurry. Claire and Holden refrain fury as focus and walk it directly to Audra's door with receipts that are quietly devastating. Audra, who has survived worse by being faster, taller, shinnier, reaches for the script that always saved her pivot. Project. Seduce the narrative into blaming gravity instead of the person who jumps it and finds it slipping in her hands, because this time the math is lined up on the wall and the room is bright. Nate breathes like a man who has been underwater and found a surface he trusts, then chooses not to drown himself in revenge. Victoria proves that empathy is not the opposite of power. It is a form of it. Lily plants a flag where calm would be easier. Kane smiles in that careful way men do when they have already hidden the key. And the city keeps time by the sound of choices hardening into futures. Billy sketches launch decks with Sally instead of poems. Nikki engineers a gentle night with Victor because love also needs logistics. Michael stares at a job offer that feels like oxygen and wonders how to inhale without lighting a match near old loyalties. By weekend's edge, the lines have been redrawn without anyone calling it a ceasefire. Claire does not forgive on command, and because she doesn't, she becomes someone she can trust again. Holden waits because waiting is how grown men prove they're not mirages. Kyle stops trying to outrun the part of himself that wants applause more than growth. Audra meets resistance equal to her talent and has to decide whether to retreat and rebuild or stand and scorch. Nate and Victoria step back from the edge, which may be the surest sign they can approach it later without falling. Lily keeps watching, which is how you keep a city honest. Kane keeps moving, which is how trouble learns to spell your name. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the most ordinary fact reveals itself as the bravest plot twist of the week. Accountability is not a punishment in Genoa City. It is the only way out.